Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. This is J.R. Moore coming to you live from deep in the mountains of the Missouri Ozarks. On Friday, the 3rd day of August, year of our Lord 2012. Welcome to the John Moore Show. Well, it's 72 degrees here, deep in the mountains of the Missouri Ozarks, on to a high right at 100 degrees. All things being equal, we should have my friend Ann Morrison with us this morning, as we do most mornings. We do have some Earth Change headlines at standeo.com. Let's just jump right in here, going first to the Atlantic Ocean. The worst is yet to come. Atlantic hurricane season. Still in the Atlantic. Tropical Depression number 5 forms over the Atlantic. Next headline, an astonishing 4,313 heat records smashed in July. Then we have drought-related loans open to non-farm businesses. Next we have, going down to Arkansas, water drying up fast across Arkansas, going across the Atlantic to Italy. Italy may have lost a third of its corn crop due to heat and drought. Next headline, going to the American West, Western wildlife recovery likely to take years. Then we have scientists warn Congress about disastrous effects of climate change. Going across the Pacific Ocean to New Zealand, New Zealand's White Island volcano showing signs of unrest. Back to this country, historic drought and giant dust storms and massive power grid failures, a glimpse into our future. Going over to North Carolina, at least 4 waterspouts strike North Carolina's Outer Banks. Then we have study. The western United States forest could see a 100-year drought. Then we've got drought-hit cattlemen, ethanol hurting us, give us a break. Yeah, well, that's a bunch of smoke and mirrors. Then we've got extreme weather up 30% across the United States, with a special note from Stan attached to that. Going over to Colorado, group warns about more extreme weather in Colorado. Going to the Pacific, to the southeast, severe storm risk from Atlanta, Tallahassee, and Jacksonville areas. Okay, here's our first break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And good morning, Ann. How are you?
Good morning, John. Well, it's pretty warm again.
Well, when 90 degrees is a cooling trend, you know it's hot.
They keep telling us that, well, we're almost back to normal.
Yeah,
but I think it's still above normal here.
Yeah, well, typically the last 2 weeks of July, the first 2 weeks of August in our neighborhood is typically the hottest time of the year. On one hand. On the other, let's recall, if we would, you and I, we had 94 degrees in March.
Oh yeah, this whole year now they are saying is above normal, and it's going to be one of the warmest years in history.
Well, weather records go back in our area to about the 1880s. Anything before then is typically not very reliable and very sporadic. So we've got about 130 years worth of fairly accurate weather keeping records here in west of the Mississippi.
Well, people are starting to wonder what they're going to tell their children, how they're going to be able to cope with with the climate changes that are coming up. But I want to tell you about North Carolina. Have you heard about the law in North Carolina?
Which law is that? I did. I did hear about it. Please tell everybody. Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Go ahead. Well, television comedian Stephen Colbert. You know Stephen Colbert? Have you ever seen him? He's a funny guy. Okay. Jokes that North Carolina, among the states most vulnerable to rising sea levels, with its long Atlantic Ocean coastline and thousands of square miles of low-lying land, was considering making rising sea levels illegal.
Yeah, is it a law that actually became law?
It actually became law, and the governor has said that she will not sign it, but it'll become a law after 30 days or whatever their time limit is. And what they cannot do, what the law actually doesn't make rising sea levels illegal. Stephen Colbert was just joking about that. But what it does do is it says they cannot incorporate anything about climate change into the planning. So if they're planning a subdivision or something, they cannot take into account that it might be underwater soon.
Right. Well, you're absolutely right, Ann. North Carolina, I lived in North Carolina for better part of 2 years, and it's a beautiful state. I almost became a permanent resident there. But the first more than 100 miles coming in from the Atlantic Ocean is very flat, very low altitude. I don't believe there's anything more than a couple hundred feet above sea level for the first 100+ miles. So they're very much at risk. And I didn't think about it much at the time when I was at Fort Bragg all those months, but the ground's very sandy. I mean, looking back on it, I think that was under the ocean at one time, given the amount of sand that the soil, not much dirt actually, a lot of sand.
Well, I know that is a fact because I was there, and I was used to to places where the soil was next to the road,
right.
And we got a flat tire, and I said, "Well, just pull off on the shoulder." And I was with my brother and my husband, and they looked at me kind of strange, and then they did that. And, of course, we couldn't get out of the sand. Luckily,
right.
we were real close to the Marine base, and there were some very nice Marines there, and they pushed us out of the sand. We managed to change our tires. But, yes, it's very sandy there.
Yes, it is. Of course, you were near Camp Lejeune, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, Ann, I was going over Earth Change headlines there from standeo.com before the start of the show, and I also read an article at Steve Quayle's website. Apparently more than half of the counties in the United States are now considered a disaster area. There's more than 3,000, I think not quite 3,500 counties in the United States, and more than half of them are now considered having some kind of crisis, drought-related.
Well, yeah, all the cities around this area, around St. Louis, that are not that did not opt into joining the Metropolitan Water District. I think it's called American Water, has the contract at the moment, which gets its water from the Missouri River and then processes it into drinking water. The ones that opted not to do that, the ones that are on wells, they are having serious problems, and they are starting water restrictions, and I think that's true across all of those counties. I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago on this show that we need to take our lessons from the West. And in the West, for instance, in Arizona, when they ran out of water in their closest aquifer, they drilled down to the next aquifer, and they emptied it. And now they're drilling down. They want permission to drill down yet again, and partly that's because of the industry that moved from California to Arizona, because of and they're very water-intensive industries. Well, when they get through with the water, it's not drinkable. So if we want to turn the Midwest into a desert, then that's what we'll do. We'll just drill down to the next aquifer. Let's take a lesson from that. Let's think about, what they did in Southern California is they built water retention basins. And, in fact, Morrison, the year before last when it was flooding, became a water retention basin. It's in Iowa. And the levee broke there, and they wiped out all the lowland. And the Army Corps of Engineers says, well, we're not going to build that levee again. We'll build it up higher, closer to the city. So essentially, they kept the Missouri from flooding by, well, they didn't build the basin. The river built the basin and filled it, and now they won't have any groundwater problems. So let's take a lesson from the West Coast and start thinking. In fact, where I lived in Anaheim, they on an old quarry, they built a water retention basin, and when it rained, the water, instead of being directed out to the ocean, went into this basin, and eventually it filled up, and they built a high, I mean, it must have been a 12-foot fence around it, because it was not for swimming. It was not for people to use. All it was, the water there was to replenish the aquifers, which were drying up. So this is not an unusual thing. I mean, this is what we've learned on the West Coast.
Well, they've become very clever in the desert of Southern California, and it is the desert.
It's semi-arid. You're
being too polite, and if there's cactus growing in your backyard, you're in the desert. But they become very clever. I mean, it's kind of ironic that 20+ million people decide to move to the desert and live and work. Our situation has always been a bit different here in the Midwest. Up until this year, the water was not much of an issue except for short periods. Here comes the however. However, what we're experiencing here in summer 2012 may be, I emphasize may be, the new normal.
Well, and exactly, there's and we need to think as we are the adults, John. We are the people who need to go to the town council, and we need to go to the meetings, and we need to say we don't want our town or our county or our state turned into a desert. Now, my idea was there are some rivers that feed into the Missouri, and some of them are fairly level. I mean, there's not a big drop in altitude from one end to the other, and usually they are fed by a lake or by a valley. And what they could do is blast through wherever it's the highest, move the people out of that valley, and the next time it rains, and I'm sure there will be a flood. I mean, the law of averages says that half the times you're going to get heads and half the times tails. I'm sure that because of this drought, eventually we will get a flood. And let the river, instead of flowing into the Missouri, let the Missouri flow into that river and fill up that valley so that we can have a large, make a lake, in other words.
Right.
Like they did in, they didn't make Lake of the Ozarks, but in California, in the desert, they're famous for making lakes. And we could do that here fairly easily and fill it up fairly easily. So that's another idea I'd like to put on the table anyway. They want us to think, and this is something that people need to think about carefully. They want us to think about the Dust Bowl, the 30s, especially 36, 37, 35, 36, 37, 38.
Right.
And eventually, the Dust Bowl did stop. We did get out of that, but it took a long time. It took almost a decade. And we had people that were trying to move west, and some of the western states, to their discredit, put police at the border and said, no, you can't come in.
That was a bad time in our nation's history. Here's our break-in. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back. And we've got a caller here. We've got Chris in California. Good morning, Chris.
Yeah, I wanted to find out, you guys are talking about flooding and stuff like that, and you guys are speaking about, a place to go and stuff. If say the flooding does happen, in regards to Nibiru and stuff, would I have to be out of California, like into Nevada, to be safe?
No, Chris. California, except for what they call that inland area there that's really low, most of California gets pretty high elevation pretty quick. Typically 50 miles inland from the ocean, you're at a fairly decent elevation. Some of these maps published, and there's about 24 published by various psychics, are fairly extreme and radical. Gordon Michael Scallions, for example, it shows all of California being underwater. The U.S. Navy does not. So look at altitude. Don't look at distance. Look at altitude, Chris, and once you're, I would say, 800 feet above sea level, you should be in pretty good shape.
Oh, okay, yeah. The reason why I asked is because I live in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. And after listening to your show and watching you on YouTube and all that, I have become very interested in stuff like that. And
well, you got a steep learning curve there, Chris, and a lot to learn.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the call. We appreciate it. And
there is something else to take into consideration, and that is that there is subsistence along California coast, and so California will be sinking while the sea levels are rising. That's not true of the Northwest. the northwest is rising because of the Juan de Fuca plate is pushing underneath it.
Uh-huh. All good things to keep in mind. You're absolutely right. What do we need to be talking about now, Ann? We've got about 4 minutes before the next break.
Okay, so we need to think, we need to think about the future. And if the weathermen, the people from nowhere are saying, well, you really need to start thinking about if this is going to last. We don't see any reason why it won't. Well, luckily, we have had a few sprinkles. I don't know if you had any. We didn't, but south of St. Louis, they had some rain. And what that was from was the monsoon flow. So there's a big high over the Four Corners, and it is bringing in water from the Pacific Ocean and from the Sea of Cortez or the Gulf of California. Same thing, except different names. And because it's a clockwise flow, and it's because it's a huge area. I mean, it covers probably 2/3 of the country. Well, now maybe a third or a half. It shrank a little bit. It picks up the moisture from the ocean, and it brings it overland and over the mountains. Denver has been raining for 2 weeks at least, maybe 3. And eventually and finally, that monsoon flow is coming into Iowa and Missouri, and it's probably going to reach Chicago this weekend. So that is an important thing that is happening. That big high was situated over the Midwest, as you know, and that was what was causing all our drought because it is a clockwise flow around that high, and it wasn't bringing us any moisture. It was cutting off the Gulf of Mexico moisture. However, we do have a storm forming, and this will be about the 3rd or 4th storm that's formed over the gyre that has formed that shut off the Gulf Stream. And I think you remember that. That is also a clockwise flowing gyre, and it's very warm water. And this will be about the 3rd tropical storm that's forming over that elbow between the peninsula of Florida and the Panhandle. And it's possible that will spin up into a hurricane. And then there's another one that's coming in off the coast of Africa that looks like it'll go through, it'll go south of Cuba and go into the Gulf of Mexico. They're extrapolating that's going to go into either northern Mexico or Texas.
Is that tropical depression number 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and it'll probably absorb the spin up that's that's over the gyre in the Gulf of Mexico from the Gulf Stream. So we will be able to break this drought. What will happen next year? It's anybody's guess. I mean, my plants are worn out. They think it's fall. The spiders are out. You know, the spiders that come out in the fall and build those big orb webs.
Right.
They're out here. And
really?
Yeah, so the animals think it's fall. I guess when you go from 100 to 90, mm-hmm. that indicates fall to them. I just boggles my mind to go outside and see yellow tomato plants and these big orb webs. But
they have their own little internal time clock that they go by. So
yes, but water. We're already having water wars, and I just looked at the hydrograph. The Mississippi, is closed to traffic because the barge ran onto north of St. Louis. It ran onto a sandbar, and it's closed down the Mississippi north of St. Louis. And, of course, it's closed south of the state of Mississippi because it's so low. And I just looked here, and it's at 3 feet. Now, the Missouri River is a different animal. What we did in Missouri was that we negotiated. Actually, we took them to court. Hold that
thought, Ann. We've got a break. Everybody stay tuned. We'll be back after the break. We are visiting this morning, as we do most Friday mornings, with Ann Morrison, and is the proprietor of the website Homeland-Defense number 4u.com. Link to my links page. Just go to my links page at thelibertyman.com, scroll down, click on there, and you'll be there instantly. Just look for the white picket fence and click on it. You'll be there instantly, and you can find out about all the different products that Ann offers that help you be safe from chemical attack, biological attack, radiological attack, and so forth. So, Ann, let's just jump right back in there, please.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say that there was a difference between the Mississippi River and the Missouri River in that the state of Missouri took the Army Corps of Engineers to court and told them they had to release enough water to keep the flow in the Missouri River at a certain level. And it is. The location, for instance, at Kansas City is 10.5 feet. That's the depth of the water there. And if you go along the Mississippi River, the depth of the water, even far north where they've had rain, is under 5 feet. And of course here at St. Louis, it's more like 3 feet. So, the Mississippi runs along the border of a lot of states. The Missouri runs through the state of Missouri, so we have more control over it. But that is another way to negotiate with the federal government, and that is that downstream users of the water do have a say in how much they can dam up upstream. And what had happened was that the people in Minnesota and Wisconsin had told the federal governments that they needed more dams and locks in order to keep the water tables up. Well, but of course, then if they don't let enough water out of the locks and dams, then the Missouri River would be like the Mississippi River. So right now, anybody that's on the Mississippi River is hurting, especially if they're running on wells. And in the Missouri, if they're on wells, it's hard to say. I mean, it hurts me to say that the aquifer is gone. I mean, an aquifer is not like a stream, but it's kind of like a stream. It's a very slow movement of water through the rocks. And they dig a well down, and then the well fills up with water, and that's what they use. Now, we can do what they did in the Southwest, and that is dig down to the next aquifer. But what happens is when that first aquifer dries up is that the trees and the plants that have those big, long tap roots, the ones you can't get out of the ground,
right?
They no longer have water. I mean, they're not going to grow down into the next aquifer. There's just no way. I mean, that's not what that tree does. That tree has a tap root, and it goes down as far as it's made to go down, and that's it. So when those aquifers dry up, then the trees start dying. And pretty soon, like you said, in Southern California, when you got a cactus on your land, you know you're in a desert. I was on an airplane once flying back from St. Charles. They let me go home once a month to settle my affairs back in my home in California. Right. And I got into a conversation with a fellow, and he was so proud that they were planting palm trees up near Las Vegas. I said, well, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. Who would plant a palm tree in the desert? Because palm trees are known for that, too. They absorb the water, and they take it away from the natural vegetation. Well, that didn't make me very popular, and I finally just closed my eyes. But, I have a degree. I have credits in environmental engineering, and those are some of the things that we discuss and that we talk about. And we aren't having that kind of person on our boards and in our cities and in our counties and in our states that are talking about those things. Instead, what we have is like over in North Carolina, we have the people that are worried about, they probably got land in that floodplain that they want to sell before they have to tell the people that the sea levels are going to rise and they're going to be stuck with, it's kind of like buying a bridge in Brooklyn.
Right.
They want to sell that land while they can. I don't know that for sure, and I'm not saying any names, but it certainly seems suspicious to me that they wouldn't take into account rising sea levels in North Carolina.
Well, follow the money trail, as the old saying goes, and the value of real estate along any coastal area is 2 to 3 times what it is just a few hundred yards back from that coast. So it's always been highly sought after and regarded with high regard and given a high monetary value. That's all about to change. I think it may already be changing in Florida. There's a lot of very smart people in Florida that are connected and understand what's going on in there, and are trying to unload these properties. I have a friend in Florida. He's in Central Florida, but of course, the real estate market is soft all over the country, but his home is about 12,000 square feet, and he can't even sell it at a deep discount.
Oh, that's a shame. Yeah, actually, there was a reverse migration. You know, the rich people from New York used to migrate down to Florida to retire, and that's how all the money ended up in Florida, and they built these nice resorts and things. And it is a very nice place to live. But when they let the Cubans into the country, it became, and then of course the drugs came in, and so they've reverse migrated now. The smart people that first moved down there from New York City have now migrated back up into the Appalachians, and the people in Kentucky especially are not happy about that, because what happens is that somebody with money will come in and buy a parcel of land at what the Kentuckians feel is inflated prices. Right. And so that raises the prices for everybody, and they don't want to move. I mean, they know they have a good place to live. They're on the west side of the Appalachians.
Right.
And yet these rich people come in and are buying up their land at inflated prices. And that's true all over the country. I mean, nobody likes to see somebody come in and make the land more expensive.
Yeah, my daughter lives in the Seattle area, and they're very upset with Californians coming up there and driving up the price of real estate also.
Well, yeah, that's always been that way in the Northwest. If you drive a car with a California license plate, you're likely to get it keyed. And anyway, what else? I did want to talk. I just want to say very, very fast that the 2012 DA-14 asteroid is still at about 5,000 miles at its closest point to the surface of the Earth, and that'll be on February 15th.
Okay. Well, that's something to keep track of, and hopefully it'll keep that distance.
Hopefully, and it looks like even if it hit, it would only be it'll be like the event that happened in Russia in 1908. It would just be regional. It would wipe out an area the size of Luxembourg, or more probably, I'm saying it'll go into the Indian Ocean, but that's just my opinion. I don't have anything other than it's coming in from the backside of Earth. In other words, as the Earth goes around the sun, it's coming from the backside.
Right.
Okay. Right. Protesters have defaced a secure building at the Y-12 site, and I guess you know what Y-12 is. That's the nuclear weapons facility in Tennessee.
Okay. Is that near Oak Ridge?
Yes. They cut through multiple security fences and entered a secure area, and then 2 men and an 82-year-old nun and a peace activist.
She must be a pretty feisty gal. 82-year-old nun. All right.
She's a tough old bird. They spray painted messages and poured blood on the highly enriched uranium materials facility. It stores bomb-grade uranium.
If they could do it, then I think that some young men who were terrorists with some training and equipment could do it. We got a caller here. We got Jim in Atlanta. Good morning, Jim. Hello, Jim. Hello, Jim. Well, I guess Jim's not there.
Okay, good. I mean, not good, but I wanted to talk about the reactor, the San Onofre reactor in Southern California. Now, we know that the tubes were wearing thin, and those tubes, they're calling it premature tube wear, and so what they've done is they've plugged them. So now, this is again another example of the tail wagging the dog. They've taken the design of the plant that's called for 3,500 tubes, and they've plugged, well, it doesn't say how many, it's plugged 807 in reactor 3 and 510 tubes in reactor 2. So now they've changed the design. Do you understand?
They've cut down the cooling capacity of the unit, haven't they?
Yes, John, and I'm about ready to cry because You don't want to do that. Anyway, they want to restart these things in November 18th for Reactor 2 and December 31st for Reactor 3.
Amazing. We got our caller back here. Jim is ready. Good morning, Jim, in Atlanta.
Good morning. Can you hear me now, John?
Go ahead.
Okay. Calling in from Atlanta, of course, and the reason why I'm really calling, I heard Ann's take on the spiders. Now, that may be true. I maybe have a different take on that. I'm wondering if they're running out of insects, because here in Atlanta, I'm the guy that called a few months ago. Well,
Yeah.
Still not on. Hello?
Go ahead.
Hello?
We're listening. Yeah.
I'm looking at my Maser instrument here this morning, and a common reading around right inside the house, radiation levels are at 35 and 38 millirems, and from my understanding, that's a little bit high. But anyway, What I wanted to tell you was I can go out and grill on my deck at night and actually leave the door open anymore because there's no insects or flies or moths or anything trying to get in the house because there aren't any, period.
It reminds me, Jim, a quick story before we get to the next caller. Labor Day weekend last year, I drove the interstate highway across the length, east to west of the entire state of New York, and we may have hit 3 bugs the entire night. And during fuel stops, I noticed that the lights around, these huge lights they have around service stations at night, no bugs flying around the lights. And this is a hot summer evening, Labor Day weekend, 2011, and I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked.
Yeah. Well, we had, of course, a mild winter, too, which always brings on more insects during the year. Now, just for a strange example, like I said, I have an irrigation company. I work outside all the time. I can sit on the tailgate of my truck, have an open sandwich, and lay it down on my tailgate, and there's no flies to bother me.
Amazing.
Yeah, so they're a goner. And of course, I think it's going to start coming up the food chain.
They're a critical part of our world. Even though we don't like bugs, and we have to have them. We need to move on here. We got some calls we need to get to.
Okay,
thanks for the call.
Thank you.
We got Devin. Good morning, Devin.
I'm here in Indianapolis. My question is, what's the latest on the Nibiru location, and do you buy into the lead helmet theory where the magnetic force will be so strong when it comes around that it'll wipe out our memory and leave us to be just idiots?
Well, I need to do more looking. Maybe Ann can talk about that more intelligently than I can. And I was thinking about some biblical references and how the Tower of Babel and when that may have happened and the circumstances. And maybe there's a scientific reason for that story behind the people that are not being able to talk to each other anymore. I don't know about a lead helmet, but I would think any metal would stop that radiation. Ann, jump right in. You're the scientist.
It has to be a magnetic helmet, and I'm using steel.
Okay.
I bought a M16 helmet from World War II. They're not very common, but you can still get them.
Steel pot. M1.
The steel pot?
Yeah, M1 steel pot. That's what we used in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
Okay.
They're fairly easy to get. Typically, you can get one in almost new condition for $20 or so. Be sure you get the liner, because without the liner, it's going to be very uncomfortable to wear it. We've got Jonathan in Missouri. Good morning, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Got a quick
Jonathan, hold on.
For
We
you.
got a break. You'll be our last caller, Jonathan. Everybody, stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. This is J.R. Moore. It is Friday, the 3rd day of August, and we have Jonathan from Missouri. Okay, Jonathan, please continue.
Thank you for your time. I'll try to make this quick. Over the weekend, I noticed as I stayed up way late Saturday night watching C-SPAN for some ungodly reason, I did notice that the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, was sitting in front of a congressional committee that was very pointedly, repeatedly asking crap, I'm trying to remember his name for the life of me. I can't recall it right off. But apparently in January, 5 months from now, there is a major plan for a stateside sequestration, a major sequestration plan for which DHS has made no apparent plans on the table for how to handle that. This was just throwing the committee into fits, given apparently the ramifications of such an oversight, or planning. But the guy kept stalling out and saying, well, in order to initiate that, the word has to come down from either the president or the secretary. It kind of gave the idea as if perhaps maybe there would be, with sequestration beginning in January with no definite plans for it. I'm not sure if you've heard anything on this, but if you have not, perhaps maybe you could look into that and see if maybe you can spread a little wisdom.
What's being sequestered, Jonathan?
Again, they were not terribly specific. The tone of the questioning seemed to be one of fairly large proportions, as opposed to just moving into a designated area and taking over a few things. Again, that's not the impression that they were giving. So again, I'm not entirely sure to what extent this major stateside sequestration was supposed to be limited to, but again, that was something that I thought you may have some interest in and may perhaps have an opportunity to dig in a little deeper.
Okay, well, we'll see what we can do about that. Thank you for the call, Jonathan.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Well, Ann, it's the first I've heard of that. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, I thought that maybe this planning where they were taking the continuity of government DOD employees and their families and briefing them on getting gone to their bunkers might have something to do with that, and also
it's possible.
It's 7 months, well, six and a half months, in that DA 14 2012 asteroid will probably hit the Earth, and they probably want to be prepared for that. I mean, I'm surprised they haven't said anything more than what is on the JPL-NEO site, but I keep waiting and hoping that they will say something. And most likely it will not affect the United States at all, but the fact that the DOD continuity of government people are being briefed means that it might.
Well, I agree with you. That certainly is the case. Well, we've got about a minute here to summarize your thoughts for the weekend, please.
Well, you're going to hear a lot of disinformation out there. People are out. There's a lot of carny folk that want to sell you something. Just listen to our broadcast. We'll give you the truth, and be prepared.
Okay, thanks, Ann. We'll talk later in the day. That's it for the day. That's it for the week. All be safe out there. Buy lots of ammunition. For those of you in occupied territory, the code words for today is read page 37 of the Green Book. Read page 37 of the Green Book. And that's it. You all have a great weekend, and God bless America.